Adventure Bike Shop, proud sponsors of Adventure Bike TV. Rubbish adverts.
Great at adventure.
Hello and welcome to Adventure Bike TV, where this month we're coming from my back garden, and that's my house over there, and over to my left is my little bridge. Well, okay, so that's a great big fat lie, but you know, I can live in hope. However, we have got some great news. We've been thinking long and hard about our new content for this year, and you'll be getting the return of top tech, and also we're going to be bringing you some top riding tips. Luckily, not from me, although I might be the victim. Anyway, but yes, two great new segments. Now, as always, it's on with the bike review. It's the BMW G310 GS.
Our panniers are built from the highest grade 2mm aluminium. Metal mule, engineered to be different. Proud sponsors of the bike reviews on Adventure Bike TV.
For this month's bike review, we are back at Barnstormer BMW, and we are back to a smaller bike. We're doing the G310 GS. Now, there's a bit of a thing here for me, and it's the fact that we have done some smaller bikes over the past 6 to 8 months, but this is a BMW. It's a GS. Now that brings with it for me a certain set of expectations around quality, and the fact it's carrying that GS heritage, and it's got a hold to it for me. It's really got a hold to it.
The BMW blurb says, "A thirst for adventure, every day." And then they say, with the G310 GS, the adventures don't have to be big to be unforgettable. And that is the point, isn't it? They don't have to be big, and they don't have to be on big bikes. Although, it always helps if they look the part. And this little brother is a right corker. Put it this way, if the 310 and the Big Brother 1200 were starring in, say, the new Baywatch movie, they would without a shadow of doubt be Zac Efron and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. You see what I mean? Little guy, big guy, both lookers. Maybe that's not an analogy I should share, but you know, somehow Sandra Bullock and Melissa McCarthy didn't quite work so well. But what the hell, you get what I mean. It's a good looking bike. And the specs make good reading as well. 34 horses from the 313cc single-cylinder engine, and pretty decent fuel consumption at a claimed 85 miles per gallon, which should in theory give you 200 miles tank range. That's pretty special from a small capacity adventure bike. But back to that engine. The cylinder is backward tilted, and the cylinder head rotated by 180 degrees. This configuration lends itself to a lower centre of gravity and gets more weight toward the front wheel. It has a similar frame to the 310R, but the suspension has extra travel, an added 1.6 inches up front and an extra 1.9 on the back, with a total of 7.1 inches at each end. The rear shock is also adjustable for spring preload.
I said right at the start of this bike review, this motorbike has to represent BMW and GS. It has those things that it must symbolise. And so far, I believe it does. It looks like a little GS. Absolutely just represents it. It's got everything about it in terms of the look. And the engine, now accepting that it is pretty much 1/4 of the size of the big GS, so 300 versus 1200. It is possibly, no, I think definitely the smoothest single cylinder engine I've ever ridden. I'm kind of really rather blown away by it.
It's a shame that we didn't have the opportunity to ride off-road and test out how much difference all these things actually made. But, from everything else we've heard, it is a bit of a cracker off-road. There was a bit of me that was expecting the tilted back cylinder to be really tilted back, you know, like sat back in a reclining chair type tilted. But at a quick glance, you'd probably not even notice it unless you'd been told about it. In some ways, it surprised me that BMW has taken this long to get around to a small capacity adventure bike. The strength of the GS brand is second to none across the globe. And in my mind, there's always been a space for a little brother in the family. Something more accessible that appeals to as wide an audience as possible and that will get riders inducted into the arms of the GS faithful. Well, it's here. Just one little word of warning. For all that it starts at a very reasonable 5,100 quid, its handsome looks and its great engine performance, it's just a little bit on the teeny weeny side.
I asked a question a little bit earlier about whether this bike represents what I think a BMW should mean in terms of its quality, and does it embody the GS name? Well, everything about the bike that I've seen and looked at today absolutely embodies that quality. And in terms of being the GS, does it embody what I expect a GS to? Yeah, from the moment you set eyes on it, you go, that is unmistakably a GS. And yes, okay, the engine's a lot smaller, but it's a real gem. And as I said, probably the best single, I think, or certainly the smoothest single I've ever ridden. And for me, the GS is about adventure, and this bike absolutely is that. And I think of this capacity bike, it would be the one that I would choose to take on an adventure. Which I suppose kind of answers the question what I have one in my garage. If I was a little bit shorter, 100% I would, because I think it's a fantastic bike.
Our lids open away from the bike, so they can be opened fully without interference, and they create a useful working area. Metal Mule, engineered to be different. Proud sponsors of the bike reviews on Adventure Bike TV.
Right, now, before we get into film school, we've been talking a little bit over the last few months about a brand new TV series that Tom and I are doing for Together TV. We're going to be riding the UK part of the Trans-Euro Trail over the period of 2 weeks at the end of March and the early part of April. Please keep an eye out on our Facebook because we're going to need your help when we're filming it, and we're going to want some of you to come and join us. So anyway, now it's back to Tom and film school, where he's going to be continuing talking about how to tell a story.
Hello and welcome to this month's Film School. So continuing our course on how to tell a story through film, we're this month going to be looking at the main body of your film. So first of all, what exactly is the main body of your story? Well, it's the middle. When you have a story, you have a beginning, middle and end. This is the middle, this is the main part of your story. Your introduction sets everything up. Your main body tells them what's going on, what's happening, and your end is that conclusion at the end of it. So when you go into the main body of your story, you want to make sure there is a good story there to tell. You can have a fantastic introduction, but if it then doesn't continue going, people will very quickly get bored and switch off. When you're making a documentary film, a travel film, it's very difficult to plan what is going to be in that main body of the story. And while you're there and while you're filming, that's where you'll start to get an idea of who your characters are, which characters need to be developed, and what stories there are and what small stories there are within the main narrative of the story. And it's recognising those while you're filming so that when you come back to the edit, you can make sure you get all of that into your story and make it as engaging as possible. So firstly, looking at characters, you really need to decide who your characters are. Now, it's inevitably going to be you and the people you're travelling with, but there might be other characters that come along. Other people that you meet on the trip will be characters. Maybe they won't be in the story for the entire time, but they will be characters in that story. However, it's not just people that can be characters. If we're travelling on motorcycles, as most of the people watching this probably will be, your motorcycle can be a character too, especially if your bike's a bit temperamental or having problems. It becomes a character in its own right. Don't forget to use that when you're telling your story. The second thing you really want to convey in your main body of your film is some emotion, and a range of emotions: happiness, sadness, disappointment, anger. All of those are engaging and will get an audience to engage, and you really want to make sure people were feeling what you were feeling at the time. If you take a clip, for example, where you are riding a motorcycle and you have a helmet cam and you're riding through some mountains and it's raining a bit, fine, that's a good shot. However, people don't really know what it was like to be there. Sometimes you might want to leave that shot in because you think, well, at the time, personally, I was feeling tired and cold and worn out and miserable and I just wanted to go home. But the camera isn't telling enough of a story to get that emotion across. And you either have to leave it out or you have to find a way of getting that information across. So how do you get that information across? Well, let's look at narration. There are different types of narration. There's past tense and present tense. Present tense tends to mean you are filming and recording yourself speaking as you go, either through a mic in your helmet or maybe directly to camera as soon as something's happened, and everything is present and everything is in the present tense.
I have to say, it is amazing to finally be on the road properly. It's good. We finally feel like we've started. Finally.
Then, of course, there is past tense. Now, when you're looking at past tense, you're talking about things like if you were to record a video diary at the end of the day and you use that audio as your narration, or maybe it's when you get home and you've edited the film and you add narration over the top.
Finally, the team pull out of the port at Santander and start the first day of riding. For some, this is the first time they have ridden a Honda C90.
But it's a really good tool, narration, to make sure that you're getting across those emotions. But make sure whatever you're saying you have footage for. There is no point showing lovely footage of riding on some gorgeous roads while the voiceover or the narration is telling you all about how awful something was, or how you had a big puncture and you needed to borrow a local truck to get your bike somewhere. If you haven't got any footage of that, just telling the story isn't good enough. When you're watching a film, you need to see the footage of it. Make sure you're filming.
The next day we headed off, and the first job, of course, was to get Andy's tyre fixed. Alex had already phoned ahead, and with Joe now riding pillion with him, we aimed for the tyre garage. Not only did they fix the tyre, they didn't even charge us, so we felt that at least a couple of cases of beer was going to be suitable recompense.
And this brings me on to another point. Film everything. If you're going to film, make sure you're filming all the interesting things. So many times you hear about people going, oh, well, I didn't have time to get my camera out while my bike was being fixed and things like that. It's when you don't have time to film that there are the most interesting things happening. If you only get your camera out when you have time to film, you're just going to get nice vistas and you might as well be looking at photographs. Of course, getting your camera out all the time can annoy the people you're on your trip with, so make sure you talk to them beforehand. Say, look, my main priority is to film this trip. I am going to be filming in some difficult circumstances. For example, on most of my trips, people know that if I drop my bike or my bike breaks down, either they need to take the camera off me and film me as I fix a bike or pick up my bike, or they need to pick up my bike for me, which is normally the best option. Of course, the other mistake I tend to see a lot is that people spend a lot of time filming themselves zooming past on bikes. Actually, if you think about your trip, the memories aren't very often the actual riding. The riding might be good, the roads might be fantastic, the scenery might be great, but the really good stories, they come in between those parts when you're riding. When you've stopped and you've met someone new at the side of the road, or you've seen something spectacular, or you're getting off your bike. So most of the time, those riding shots actually tend to be linking segments. They link one part of your journey to another. So you've got footage, you've got video diaries, you've got footage of people you met, you've picked your characters and things like that. How do you actually tell a story with it? Well, there's something called a story arc. Now, this is something that starts, moves forward, develops, and resolves at the end. Now, within a big film, depending on how long your film is, this might be a single thing. It could be as simple as, we left here, we drove this amount of time, it was great, this is what we saw, this is what we did, and we finished the trip. It could be as simple as that. However, it could be a bit more complicated, and if you're looking at a longer film, you'll often find that you have smaller story arcs within longer stories. So your main story might be you're travelling from A to B over the space of 2 weeks. Within that story, your bike might have some problems. You might get a puncture. So that becomes its own mini story arc. What's happening just before? How does the puncture happen? The puncture happens. How do you repair the puncture? Did you need any help from local people? Did you meet anyone who was helping you? Any of these things. How did that develop? How did it get resolved? And then the final resolve, you're back on the road, you're going again. And that is a mini story arc. And those story arcs are quite important because throughout your journey, you're going to have all of these different things that really add up to one big great film. And if you are looking at a story arc, you need to think to yourself, is this story arc interesting to everyone? Do I need to include it? Will everyone like it? And that is the hardest part of filmmaking. Telling a story through film is difficult, and we're not doing it justice by cutting it down into just a start, middle and end. It's far more complex than that, and it's far more of an emotional roller coaster than that. So the best thing I can suggest is that you go out there and practice and try and tell stories through film. But here are, I guess, just some basic top tips. Always record video diaries. Even if you're not going to use it for narration or anything like that, it helps remind you of what happened. It helps remind you when you're looking back later on of the fine nuances of your trip, the emotions you were feeling at the time. Don't be afraid to show emotion. Emotion is incredibly powerful and it makes for a good film. If you're feeling sad, say it. If you're feeling great, say it. Don't be afraid of emotion. Find characters. Doesn't matter where you find them. Doesn't matter whether it's in your group or it's people you find at the side of the road or people you meet in hotels or it's your motorcycle becomes a character. Find those characters because characters drive a story. Try and answer questions. If there is a question asked, will I fix my bike? Will I be able to get my bike back on the road after this puncture? Don't just suddenly be on your bike riding it again. Make sure you've resolved it. Make sure you've said, yes, we fixed it. This is how we fixed it. Now we can move on. Resolve all of those story arcs. Remember, we all love riding motorcycles, but it's the feeling of being on a motorcycle that we really love. If you're trying to tell a story about your trip or your adventure, the riding of the bike is just a means to get from A to B. Your stories come when you're off the bike. Okay, so that's a really, really simple overview. I hope it helps. Maybe we'll cover this a bit more later on. If you've got any questions on that, please send it in and we'll I'll try and answer them as best I can. I've used some crossfades on this, so hopefully that'll make some of the viewers happier who don't like my vlog style to this video. So hopefully you feel that's a bit better. Don't forget about our film competition that we've got going on. You can enter that online. Doesn't matter when you made your film, we just want to see as many films as we can. That's it really. We hope you have a fantastic month. Hope you like this show better than you like the last one. But we did try. I apologise. It's I can't get them all right. Sorry. But anyway, we hope you enjoy this show, and we'll see you next month.
All right, thank you, Tom. Fabulous as always. And thinking of filmmakers, it's been a while since we've had anything from Austin Vince. But here he is again with his not so regular segment, Austin Rover.
Hi there, my name's Austin Vince, and hopefully you're getting ready for motorcycle adventure. And I've got an idea for you. Here in my beloved Pyrenees in Spain, and I call it Twinshock Trailfinder.
What I love about this event is the escape. Look at this. Look at that. It's a whole region full of trails. And you'll ride for hours and not meet any other people. It's just amazing to be able to get that much riding in and that much really good quality riding in such a big area. It's a proper adventure. If you haven't got time to go to Africa, come to the Pyrenees.
In a nutshell, it's 2 days of map reading and trail riding all over these epic mountains.
It's 10 now. So down to 473.
Yeah.
Okay.
And go up to
And then
you're looking south.
Yeah.
Southeast.
However, the event is especially for cool bikes with 2 shocks at the rear. It doesn't matter how old they are, twin shock, that's the only stipulation.
Hallo, ich bin Thomas Kremer und das ist eine Kawasaki W650.
So can you bring a brand new Hinckley Triumph Street Scrambler? You bet. And it can be in a team with the divine 60s Bonneville. Every year we see a superb range of unique collectible bikes, lovingly cared for, properly cherished, and then ridden hard in the search for 80 of these dog tags spread over 400 square miles, affixed to trees and posts alongside 500 miles of trails. And this treasure hunt element attracts a certain kind of person.
My name's Simon Wake. I'm the founder and chairman of the MT Riders Club. The MT is an ex-military motorcycle from the 1980s and the 1990s. A trail bike, originally built by an English manufacturer and then taken over by Harley Davidson. We've got everybody, but more importantly, they're people that like to work on their bikes. If I was to motorcycle around the world tomorrow, I'd start with one of our guys. Most of them are deep fettlers. They're not afraid of the challenge of keeping these bikes on the road. Not just keeping them on the road, but understanding them. Every single part of our bikes we know inside and out. And if you're a new person to our club and to the bike, then you soon learn if you want to.
It's a world of maps, kickstarting, open face helmets, maps, dusty bell staffs, kickstarting, giant peaks, bungees, good times, maps, and encounters with herbs.
Hey guys. What do you got there, Thomas? It's oregano. Wow. Take some home. Fantastic. Smells fantastic. Ready to go?
Let's go.
And don't forget, it's all about picking up the checkpoint clues.
This one should be easy. 2 posts, one of them's got a cock on the top, as in a bird.
Sometimes the clue might be hidden in the text at a sturdy Spanish trig point, or in the ancient beam of a ruined farmhouse, as Jeremy and Rick were to discover.
418.
418.
Plaque is screwed to the lintel of this ruin's front doorway.
What are we looking for?
Plaque.
Yeah, WM.
WM.
Yeah, Whiskey Mike.
The event is a real challenge, so there's lots of different variables that can go right and wrong. The weather is constantly changing. As well as that, we've also got to try and find fuel as we go round. It's very much like a military exercise. So firstly, riding a military motorcycle, teamwork's massive, where we all have to work together, especially when we get a puncture on some of the trails and trails. So yeah, lots of different challenges as the day unfolds.
What I really love about this event is the variation in scenery. One minute you might be in lush green valley, the next minute open mountains, and the scenery changes completely.
I look forward to this every year. It's the event of the year for me.
You've got to look out for the other guy. It's all about the teamwork.
Just getting an old bike round here on a 42-year-old Honda. That adds to the appeal of the event, really, in my mind.
And your running improves no end.
You think you're coming out to do a dirt bike thing, but actually it's a proper mini adventure.
A brilliant escape.
And for me, that is fantastic.
I think the essence of adventure motorcycling is dealing with the unpredictable. I think that's the great thing about this event, is that it's really going to help you prepare for that big trip around the world.
Well, there you go. The always unique Austin Vince. Gotta love him. Anyway, time for a break.
The Adventure Bike Shop, proud sponsors of Adventure Bike TV. Rubbish adverts.
Great at adventure.
The Adventure Bike Shop, proud sponsors of Adventure Bike TV. Rubbish adverts.
Great at adventure.
Now it's time for Under the Visor. And over the next few months, we've got interviews with a few of the gang from Motor Freight, who are one of our sponsors. Now, before you all go up in arms saying, oh, it's just them doing a sales pitch, well, it's not. These guys have all done great adventures by motorbike. And here's the first one. It's Tim.
Don't ride here. Ride here. Explore new horizons with Moto Freight. Proud sponsors of Under the Visor.
Hello, my name's Tim Pugh. I work for Motor Freight and I go on jollies on bikes. Well, I have done. Yeah. I've got an old Honda Africa Twin. It's the newest of the old, 1999, and I love it to bits. Yeah. I first got into motorcycling as a method to basically go travelling. I left the army, bought this Africa Twin, and yeah, with the whole idea of just driving around the world or doing something pretty nuts. And I just sort of focused towards that and did it a bit. Yeah, I made it to Australia, yeah, and then Bank said no. So then, yeah, I had to come back and work, which sucks. Like, but this is a nice company, it's great, yeah. But generally working, yeah. I had 18 months of not working. It's pretty, you know, I could do whatever I want. It's a pretty amazing lifestyle, yeah. So I set off from Wales. I basically went through Europe. I camped most of the way. I had about 4 or 5 days, and then I'd stop and I'd do some admin, like washing clothes and stuff like that. And then it was up to Estonia. I crossed half of Russia, and then down to Mongolia. In Ulaanbaatar. It happened to be winter at the time. It was just the time I set off and just kind of dealt with it. I crossed the central Gobi Desert in Mongolia, which I'm quite proud of. Mongolians do it every day, but you know, yeah, minus 35, and that was interesting. That was really good. I wouldn't want to do it again, but yeah. And then so I flew the bike to Delhi in India. I waited 2 months for it. It was nothing to do with motor freight at the time. And yeah, that was a bit of a nightmare. But during that time, I rented a few Enfield Bullets, rode them around. I did 6 months in India, which was probably too long. Then Nepal, freighted it from Nepal to Kuala Lumpur, and then a boat over to Indonesia, through Indonesia, landed in Australia, had enough and came home. I'd say the worst bit of travelling is people trying to take advantage of you and trying to read that. Other than that, it is awesome, and good or bad, whatever happens, it's still interesting, and it's a story at the end of the day. So eventually, you do get over something, and yeah, and it's another story then. I think Mongolia was the most interesting because it's so far away from our own culture. You know, you can go to America and it's pretty much the same as that, and you haven't got that adventure into the different culture and challenging with that. And yeah, it's just nuts. India was nuts as well. So I think India and Mongolia were sort of on par with nutsness. Basically before I stepped off on the trip, I spent 3 months in my mum's garage, basically learning about the bike. I basically taught myself. I stripped it down and put it back together and tarted it up a bit, and then went for it. So I didn't have any problems with the bike. There was the odd ones here and there, but I just went on social media and people come up with suggestions and answers if you are stuck, and then the whole social media aspect of it is absolutely fantastic. Yeah, it wasn't all smooth. I was nearly facing 5 years in jail in Mongolia. Let's not go into that. And there was a considerable hospital stay in Goa, and yeah. So yeah, I mean, they're all stories now, and it was good fun at the time. Yeah. No, pretty much after that, I just kind of wanted to settle down, and I have done. Expecting a first child in May, so that's the next adventure, and yeah, possibly, you know, financial constraints for the rest of my life, well, for 18 years anyway. So I've just knocked it on the head for a bit until I retire. Right, I've seen. Basically, after doing, whilst I was on that, I've got a friend back in Wales, and he would always go around Scotland, and he was having, he was enjoying it just as much as I was, but I was spending a lot of money doing it. And I'm quite interested in doing the Trans-European Trail, or parts there of it, and getting into trail riding, basically. And that's, you know, you could do weekend adventures. It doesn't have to be in the depths of wherever. You know, you can still go off and have some fun for a weekend, going to get some milk from the shops. You don't know what can happen. When you come back from a trip like this, everyone bigs you up. Everyone that your immediate friends will all speak to you, and because the majority of your immediate friends aren't doing it, you put on a bit of a pedestal, and that gives you like a fake sort of, it builds you up quite a lot. And then when you do finish, and you come home and people say, oh wow, you know, how was your trip? And you know, they're only brushing over it, and you can't tell them everything. You can't, you know, you can't pass all of that on. And then there's a moment where it just dies. And then that's when the like post-trip blues kick in, and it's really difficult to deal with. I couldn't find a job for a bit. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I hadn't planned that far ahead. I just had this romantic notion of just ride off into the sunset, and then the sun sets, and then but I saw this job come up. It was on the doorstep, and it was ticking all the boxes, and yeah, it's good. It's really good. You know, if you're working in an avenue that you're interested in anyway, and it's just great to see people with different attitudes and well, especially the bikes. The bikes are a focus point, and then it's people's attitude, and you can almost feed off their excitement. It's fantastic. It really is. It's really nice where you just get lost. I'm creating a bike, and I'll just get lost talking to someone else who's messing about with their bike in the background, and probably not as much gets done as it should do, but it's a great conversation anyway. It feels really good to help people because I've done it myself. It's exciting. I had an absolutely amazing time, and just to feed off other people's excitement, it's wonderful. We'll do absolutely anything to help these people out. And yeah, there was one guy, he left his boots and he hadn't brought any trainers, so I made him some flip-flops out of some cardboard and string, and he wore it on a business class flight, which was all quite funny. I think one of the biggest lessons, honestly, that I learnt from travelling is that the romantic image, it's like the cowboy image, the romantic image of, you know, you're stuck in the middle of nowhere, you're rustling cows, you're lonely. That's got to be pretty grim, but there's still a romantic notion with it. When I was crossing Russia, I was just, you know, I just thought, wow, you know, crossing the Russian steppes. I thought, wow, yeah, brilliant. But actually, it was grim in times, and it was lonely. But then you do look back on it in a positive light because it's something difficult that goes to define part of your character.
Don't ride here. Ride here. Explore new horizons with MotoFreight, proud sponsors of Under the Visor.
Right, now it's time for the travel journal, and it's Oliver from Bwokentoof with his amazing short movie Namaste. 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 I got that right? Namaste. Anyway, it's Oliver from Bwokentoof. Namaste!
At that time, I was placed in Kalimati police station. It was a woman cell. So what I asked one of the officer, please, can you just take me inside the prison? Because in our mind, when you talk about jail, it's like a big walls with the bars and everything. So I wanted to see. In our country, like the culture, it's not a big thing to just go and hold anyone's child, just, charge them. It's nothing here. But one of the people from the prison, they said that don't hold her. And I just dropped her down, because I was scared. But when I turned back my body, she just held my clothes, So just I turned back and she just gave me a big smile. She was just 8-month-old girl. And I feel like she had that light in her face. She had that magic, So what I thought is like, I should do something. I should do something for these children.
It is my great honor tonight to announce the 2012 CNN Hero of the Year. The 2012 CNN Hero of the Year from Kathmandu is Pushpa Vasna.
I can say, whatever you have passion for right now, go for it. Don't look back, go for it. I'll be always there for them.
Right, well, that's it. Sadly, it's the end of the show. I need to go back to my house, which isn't that one, it's that way. But 2 quick reminders before we finish. New segments coming up. Back by popular demand is Top Tech, and also, of course, the rider tips. And please keep an eye out on Facebook for details about the Great British Bike Off, the new TV series with me and Tom that we're going to be filming at the end of March and the start of April, where we will be needing your help. We will see you next month.
The Adventure Bike Shop, proud sponsors of Adventure Bike TV. Rubbish adverts.
Greater adventure.